Grace's flight from justice had driven her into the darkest corners of Los Angeles. Her once pristine lab coat replaced by a leather jacket and her heels traded for worn sneakers that slapped against back alleys and fire escapes as she tried to stay one step ahead of Bill Spencer's relentless pursuit. With every mile she put between herself and the clinic's ruined facade, her mind churned with fear and resolve. Fear of prison bars and public shame, resolve to protect the secret formula she had developed, the experimental compound she believed could rewrite the fate of anyone who needed a medical miracle. But desperation makes strange bedfellows, and when Grace found herself cornered in a half-lit motel room off Sunset Boulevard, her only hope lay in calling on the one person in Los Angeles more notorious and more resourceful than Bill Spencer himself, Sheila Carter. Sheila answered Grace's covert phone call with the calm predatory grace that had made her a legend among those who trafficked in secrets and whispered deals. The meeting place was a deserted stretch of coastline beneath the Santa Monica Pier, where waves crashed against pylons like the ticking of a clock counting down to Grace's capture. When Sheila emerged from the shadows, her red hair glinting in the moonlight, her eyes sharp as broken glass, Grace felt a chill. Sheila Carter, long thought locked away or worse, had built her own empire of influence in the underworld of biotech espionage, and she would not help a stranger without a price. Grace, bruised by her escape and by the betrayal of colleagues who had turned state's evidence against her, laid her cards on the table. She held a supply of the unapproved liver-regenerating drug, the compound that had saved the life of a terminal patient in a clandestine trial, and she believed it could save Deacon Sharp, the man who had been like a father to Paris, whose liver was failing by the day. Sheila paused, studying Grace as if she were a puzzle to be solved. Deacon's plight had reached Sheila's ears through whispered contacts in the hospital's basement corridors. Contacts Grace had unwittingly set in motion by applying for compassionate use of her drug under a false identity. Deacon's liver was so scarred that conventional transplants carried too high a risk. The only hope was Grace's compound, unapproved but promising. Sheila knew Deacon's importance to Paris, to Liam, and to the Spencer Buckingham power structure. She also knew that if she helped Grace, Bill Spencer would be chasing two phantoms instead of one, buying Sheila time to manipulate the Spencer medical files for her own purposes. She agreed, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Grace would have sanctuary at Sheila's hidden safe house in the Hollywood Hills, and in return Grace would secure access to the Spencer Clinic's vault of patient records and proprietary research. Information that could net Sheila millions if sold to the highest bidder in the black market of pharmaceutical secrets. Thus, unlikely allies forged a pact of mutual betrayal. Grace would supply Sheila with the illicit compound and medical expertise to administer it to Deacon in secret, and Sheila would use her network to scrub Grace's digital footprint and cloak her presence from Bill's investigators. In the days that followed, Grace moved like a ghost through the Spencer Clinic's restricted corridors, the doors opening for her only because Sheila's strings tugged at a network of bribed technicians and intimidated IT staff. Grace's heart pounded as she extracted patient records and security footage, racing against time to duplicate hard drives before the clinic's new chief operating officer, Dr. Marcus Ellis, once Grace's trusted colleague, noticed anomalies in the system. Marcus had been the first to suspect Grace's misdeeds, the one who had confronted her about irregularities in trial protocols and unexplained shipments to shell companies. Now he patrolled the data center with a frown, scanning logs and comparing them to the backup schedule, unaware that Grace herself was the phantom deleting forensic trails under Sheila's guidance. Meanwhile, high above the clandestine operations, Finn found himself caught in the crossfire of familial loyalties and professional ethics. The young doctor, once betrothed to Grace by circumstance and affection, had witnessed her downfall with a broken heart. Finn's loyalty to the truth had cost Grace her license, but his loyalty to Grace the person still tugged at his conscience. When Sheila's name surfaced first as a rumor among interns, then confirmed by a mysterious source, Finn confronted his adoptive mother in her penthouse lair of stolen treasures and black market research catalogs. Sheila, ever the master manipulator, greeted Finn's anger with feigned maternal concern. She warned him that the stakes were higher than a single rogue surgeon's ambition. Global pharmaceutical conglomerates were circling, eager to obtain Grace's formula, and if anyone got their hands on unregulated data, tens of thousands of patients could die. Sheila claimed her own intervention was a bulwark against corporate mercenaries, framing herself as a protector of the public, even as she schemed for personal profit. Finn, torn between revulsion at Sheila's past crimes and the knowledge that Deacon's life hung in the balance, could only promise to keep her secret, but he vowed to secure proper medical oversight for Grace's drug. Yet Finn's battle was twofold. In parallel with his clash against Sheila's moral ambiguity, he squared off against Dr. Marcus Ellis, who had grown suspicious of the newly installed firewalls and encrypted backups. Marcus insisted on auditing the clinic's missing data, and when his inquiries led him to a file marked Lazarus Project, he recognized Grace's handwriting. He confronted Finn in the sunlit atrium of the clinic, where patients drifted past on wheelchairs and nurses bustled in pastel scrubs. Marcus's voice was low but urgent. "If you know what she's doing, Finn, you have to report it. You're breaking every regulation in the book." Finn's face went pale. Marcus's words echoed Sheila's claim that they were preventing a corporate apocalypse, yet they also mirrored the charges that had stripped Grace of her license. Finn realized that by harboring Grace's secret, he risked becoming an accessory to medical malfeasance. Torn between saving a man's life and upholding the Hippocratic Oath, he felt the weight of every patient who had once looked to the Spencer Clinic for hope. Back in Sheila's hidden laboratory, an underground suite beneath a nondescript warehouse, Grace prepared the first dosage for Deacon. The air was thick with the hum of refrigeration units and the metallic scent of antiseptics. Sheila frowned as Grace measured the crystalline powder into vials, her gloved hands steady despite the risk. "We have maybe 2 days before Bill's people realize the clinic's data vault has been compromised," Sheila said, her tone clipped. "If we don't get Deacon treated tonight, he won't survive long enough for the next batch." Grace's eyes softened when she spoke of Deacon, her fingers pausing over the vial. "He believed in me," she whispered. "Even when everything else fell apart, he trusted I could save him. I owe him this." That night, Finn slipped into the warehouse under the guise of a routine supply run, his stethoscope concealed beneath a lab coat. He froze when he heard Deacon's raspy breathing through an open-access hatch. Peering inside, he saw Grace leaning over the frail figure, syringe in hand, as Sheila stood guard with a loaded pistol. The tableau was surreal. Deacon's chest rose and fell unevenly, Grace's face illuminated by the glow of a single surgical lamp, Sheila's eyes glinting with triumph. Finn's heart clenched. He stepped forward, calling out Grace's name, an echo of the promise he once believed she stood for. Grace looked up, shock and relief washing across her features, but Sheila's gun captured Finn's attention first. "Stay back," Sheila warned, her voice cold steel. "He's what matters now." Finn dropped the pretense of steel himself and strode forward. "Grace, let me help," he pleaded. "We can do this by the book. Bill won't go after us if he sees Deacon live on the front page." Sheila laughed, a low, mirthless sound. "Bill Spencer would rather bury the truth and the patient than admit he was wrong. Your naivete is astounding." Finn's gaze hardened as he addressed Grace. "Sheila's right about Bill. He'll manipulate the story, hide the drug's origin, and we'll be scapegoats or worse." Grace etched a line between her brows. "What's your plan, then?" Finn took a breath. "We finish the infusion, but then we leak the data to the FDA under an anonymous tip. We shift the narrative from greed to compassion. Deacon survives, proof that the compound works, and we force the authorities to investigate Bill's sabotage, not punish the only people trying to save lives. A tense silence stretched as Sheila weighed Finn's words. Her jaw tightened, and for a heartbeat, Grace feared Sheila would kill them both rather than relinquish control. Then Sheila's shoulders slumped, and she holstered her gun. "You'd risk my edge?" she asked Grace. Grace nodded. "I'll share the formula with the authorities once Deacon's stable. I'm done hiding in the shadows." Sheila's lips curved into a smile that was almost genuine. "Very well. Let's save your friend, Doctor. But remember, debts in our world rarely go unpaid." In the following hours, Grace administered the experimental drug as Finn monitored Deacon's vitals, calibrating dosages and adjusting infusion rates. The old man's eyes fluttered open at dawn, his color returning like sunrise through a stormy night. Grace exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and Finn placed a hand on her shoulder. Outside, the first rays of morning lit the warehouse windows, promising a new beginning. But beyond the safety of that underground lab, Bill Spencer was waking to an empty data vault and no suspect in sight. The chase would resume, more furious than ever, as loyalties shifted and alliances fractured in the glare of the coming storm. Grace had won a reprieve, Deacon had won a second chance, and Finn had risked everything to forge a fragile truce between villains and victims. Yet, in a world built on secrets and betrayals, peace is always temporary. Merely the calm before another reckoning. And as Grace, Sheila, and Finn emerged from the shadows into a world unprepared for their truth, they knew that the bold and the beautiful would never rest until every hidden wound was bared to the light. Deacon's labored breathing rattled through the sterile confines of Sheila's hidden laboratory like the tolling of a death knell, each rasping exhale a reminder that time was slipping through their fingers. Grace hovered over him with a syringe held aloft, the final ampoule of what should have been the life-saving compound dripping into the infusion line. Finn stood at the portable monitors, eyes darting between the readouts and Deacon's ashen face, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the stainless steel tray. The cold dawn light filtering through the narrow windows painted long shadows across the concrete floor, but inside those walls there was no warmth. Only the awful knowledge that something had gone terribly wrong. The clear liquid Grace had administered was not the regenerative serum she had perfected. Somehow, in the chaos of their flight and the hurried preparation under Sheila's watchful glare, it had become a worthless saline substitute, or worse, a neurotoxin. Deacon's heart rate plunged, his blood pressure plummeted, and a desperate howl tore from Sheila's throat as she lunged forward. "She lied to us." Sheila screamed, her voice echoing off the bare walls as she yanked the syringe from Grace's trembling hand. "You bastard daughter of a killer, what did you do to him?" Grace's lips parted in a silent gasp as she stumbled backward, eyes wild with shame and panic. I don't know," she stammered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed the truth. She had switched the vials herself, convinced that Deacon's imminent death would rally Paris, Liam, Finn, and even Bill Spencer to her side, pleading for her mercy, begging for the miracle she alone could provide. It was a gambit born of desperation and a grim testament to how far she had fallen from the idealistic surgeon she once believed herself to be. Sheila's fury coalesced into a low, dangerous whisper. "You used him as bait." Finn's face crumpled. "Grace, how?" But Grace could not meet his gaze. Her eyes flitted to the console, where the alarms blared in shrill protest, then back to Deacon, whose eyes fluttered open only to roll back into his skull. With every second that ticked by, he slipped further from consciousness, further from life. Sheila's hand found the pistol at her hip, the weight of it a grim promise of retribution. "You cost him his only chance," she spat, each word a blade aimed at Grace's heart. Grace sank to her knees beside the cot, her gauntlet hands clasped as though in prayer. I'm sorry, she whispered, though her apology rang hollow against the din of the monitors. I never meant for this. But there was no forgiveness in Sheila's eyes, only the cold calculus of a predator betrayed. In one swift movement, Sheila seized Grace by the collar, hauling her upright so that their faces were inches apart, the gun's barrel grazing Grace's temple. You're done, Sheila hissed, the words carrying the finality of a verdict. I trusted you. And now he's going to die because of you. In the midst of their confrontation, a sudden crash reverberated through the chamber as Sheila's foot struck a loose tray on the floor, sending medical instruments clattering like bones. Sheila lost her footing and stumbled backward, the pistol flying from her grip. It skidded across the floor and clanged against a support strut as she reached for it, her body twisting awkwardly. Grace's eyes widened in horror as Sheila fell against a rack of glassware, shattering 3 vials of antiseptic solution that sprayed like rain over her shoulder. Sheila cried out, a deep, guttural sound, clutching her side where a shard of broken glass had pierced her flesh. Blood blossomed through her blouse, dark and unstoppable. Grace hesitated, torn between the urge to flee and the instinct to help. But Sheila, her voice ragged with pain and rage, barked a single command. Go. Get out while you can. Across the lab, Finn darted toward them, but by the time he reached Sheila's side, Grace had already bolted through the emergency exit, the door slamming shut in a defiant punctuation. Finn dropped to his knees beside Sheila, ripping a length of tubing free to fashion a tourniquet, but Sheila's breaths came shallow and uneven, her eyes glassy with shock. She's gone for good, Sheila rasped, blood bubbling at her lips. And he's going to die thinking she cared. Outside, a harsh siren cut through the stillness, followed by the pounding of boots and the staccato rhythm of police radios. Finn's blood pounded in his ears as he applied pressure to Sheila's wound, but the paramedics who surged into the lab were too late for the underworld behemoth who had once controlled the fate of so many. They found Sheila slumped over the makeshift stretcher, her lifeblood staining the sterile floor. She looked up at Finn, eyes flickering with the last embers of defiance, and whispered, "She played us all." Her hand reached up, as though to grasp his, but it fell limp, and the paramedics covered her with a sheet. Meanwhile, Grace darted through the alleyways of Hollywood, clutching her ruined leather jacket around a thin frame. Her boots slipped on puddles of rainwater and spilled oil as she sprinted toward the relative safety of a waiting car. Her only companion a burner phone whose battery was at 30%, its last message a cold directive from some other accomplice to vanish beyond the city limits. She ducked into the front seat, slammed the door, and barked an address to the driver without a backward glance. As the car peeled away, the flashing red and blue strobe of police cruisers illuminated the narrow street, casting long, accusatory shadows on the graffiti-marred walls. Behind her, in the subterranean lab now crawling with uniformed officers and forensics teams, the scene unfolded like a grotesque theater. The officers cordoned off the entrance, ushering paramedics and detectives past rows of overturned stainless steel tables and shattered glass. Finn, his white coat smeared with blood and antiseptic, was escorted by a detective who demanded an explanation. Finn's eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and grief, followed the paramedic stretcher carrying Sheila's covered form. "Sheila Carter is dead," Finn said in a hushed voice, more a statement than an answer. "And Grace Buckingham, she's nowhere to be found." At the precinct, Bill Spencer paced under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders to his legal counsel, the Spencer Publications PR team, and every private investigator in his employ. "Find her," he growled into the receiver. "Alive or dead, I want her. And if she's behind this, if she murdered Sheila Carter and let Deacon die, then I will dismantle whatever twisted empire she's hiding behind." His eyes flicked to the television screen mounted in the corner, where the police scanner crackled with live updates. A reporter's voice filtered through. Source confirms that the body of notorious underworld figure Sheila Carter was discovered in a makeshift medical lab in Hollywood Hills. No sign of Dr. Grace Buckingham, though investigators suspect she fled the scene. Deacon Sharp, the patient at the center of yesterday's clandestine treatment, has been listed in critical condition. Bill slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the coffee cups and scattering documents. Critical condition? He snarled, the words like tinder to a wildfire of rage. She killed him. He ripped the phone from his ear and gestured to a portrait of Paris and Deacon on the wall, a photograph of happier days when families were intact and secrets were buried. And she's going to pay, he vowed, turning away from the image as though she had never been part of his world. Far from the city, Grace sat huddled in the back of a nondescript SUV barreling down the freeway toward the Mexican border. She pressed her ear to the cracked window, listening to the distant wail of sirens fade into the hum of the engine. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly, hollow cheeks, wild eyes, and the faintest trickle of dried blood at the corner of her mouth. She slipped her hand into an inner pocket and drew out a worn photograph of Paris, her daughter's face smiling with innocent hope, and for a moment, something like regret flickered across Grace's features. But the road to redemption is paved with broken promises, and Grace knew that at this point, survival meant leaving everyone she had ever cared for behind. The city receded into the haze of rain-soaked asphalt, and Grace Buckingham, once a brilliant surgeon with the world at her feet, became only another ghost fleeing into the night, her sins and her secrets trailing like smoke in her wake. And back in Los Angeles, as the police combed through the wreckage of broken lives and shattered alliances, one question haunted every corridor of power and every shadowed alley. Would Deacon live? Would justice catch the fugitive? Or would Grace's trail of betrayal forever consign her to the realm of the bold and the beautiful, untouchable, unrepentant, and unseen? Only the coming days would reveal the final verdict.